Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm playing checkers chess, where chess pieces are replaced by checkers pieces. All pieces still move normally. My goal is to win 3 games. Let's get started with game number 1. My screen will be on the mini board and I'll put up the analysis board for you guys to follow along. I'll go ahead and start with my usual d4, I'll play the London system, and this should be very similar to blindfold chess, where really what you're looking for is patterns. So I know right now that I've started playing the London system. My opponent has played d5, so I'm very comfortable with this position. I'll always know this is a bishop because this is a standard place to put the bishop in the London system, and we're met with knight to c6. Understanding the relationship between your pieces will also help a lot because it's a lot easier to remember a relationship than it is, for example, that's a knight on c6 or that's a pawn on d5. So for me, for example, I always get annoyed by this move because there's the potential for knight to b4, so I like to play c3. Now I know what both of these pieces are based off of just one relationship. Okay, I also know there's a pawn chain here, so by the knight capturing, I can definitely recapture and just win the knight. So far I'm up a piece and I still have the normal development setup, so I'm really just looking for e3, knight f3, bishop d3, castles, boring chess, fall asleep, nothing super exciting. King to d7? Okay, I wonder if that's like an attempt at confusing me. Anyways, back to relationships between the pieces. I know that the queen was defending the d5 pawn, so I'll develop my knight and target the pawn. And it's really interesting because now I know what 3 different pieces are based off of one kind of scenario, right? Oh, and we get the resignation. Very, very nice. Okay, let's see if I can get rid of the checkered pieces. Okay, Shift Alt C. Okay, good. Last time when I was doing the blindfold challenge, I closed all of my Chrome tabs and had to restart because I misclicked. Anyways, here we are. This is the original position. And what I was going to say is based off of one relationship, I know that the knight is targeting the pawn, actually 4 pieces if you think about it, which is not protected by the queen because the king cut it off. And to me, that's all one relationship, but it gives me an easy way to identify 4 different pieces and their positions on the board. Obviously, the fact that there's actual checkers marking the spots of the pieces makes it a little bit easier, but that's kind of the gist of it. Let's go ahead and move on to game number 2. Oh, it seems my opponent's offered a rematch. Okay, sure, we'll take him up on it. Cool. Game number 2. Oh, okay. I guess my rematch didn't go through in time. Let's go ahead and play d4. We've got a new opponent rated 1554, so this opponent's been around a little bit more. We'll play bishop to f4. So far, so good. Normal London system. Knight to c6. That's so funny that we're getting the exact same opening. Knight to f6. Okay, now we're back to normal London system. I'm just going to play e3, all the normal developing moves, and I'll try to explain along the way exactly what relationships I'm looking at. Okay, this is another very, very common relationship. The 2 bishops staring at each other, right? We're both fighting for e5. You'll notice that my opponent developed knight to c6 and bishop to d6. It's very, very common here to follow up with ideas of pushing through e5, but that goes head to head with my idea of also fighting for e5, right? With the d4 pawn, with the bishop, with the knight. Anyways, usually what I play here is bishop g3 with the idea that should my opponent capture my bishop, I can recapture, opens up a file for my rook. So that way I identify 4 different pieces with just one relationship. I've now developed my bishop. Okay, we do get that e5 push, which I believe is a blunder. Normally you have to set that up with the queen or the rook. But right now my opponent only has 2 defenders on that pawn. And like I mentioned just a second ago, I have 3 different attackers. I'll go ahead and take with the pawn. Now we're forking the bishop and the knight. My opponent captures with the knight and I'll just recapture with the bishop. Already looking for a trade since I've now won material, and we are now officially up a piece. We get rook to e8, 3 moves too late, but I'll go ahead and move back my knight, and we should just be up a clean piece now. Okay, we get pawn to c5. Just because we're up a piece doesn't mean we start playing crazy chess, right? Back to normal development, I still have to castle. We get bishop to g4, which pins the knight, which is a little bit annoying, so I'm gonna go ahead and boot the bishop first. Not to mention if I get a trade, I'd be happy, right? If you're up material, you want trades. I know I've talked about this a lot on the channel. If you're up material, you want trades because that material difference is more felt by your opponent, right? If you have an extra queen, you'd rather just have an extra queen against your opponent's pawns than against a bunch of different pieces. We get bishop back to h5. Sure, I'll go ahead and just castle now. And basically the rest of this game, converting the rest of this game should just be a matter of getting as many trades as possible. We'll play the bishop back to go ahead and break the pin on the knight, right? So another example, one single pin tells me that black has a bishop on h5, a knight on f3, I have a bishop on e2, and I have a queen on d1. Okay, knight to e4, sorry, invites a trade, which I will happily accept. And recapturing with the pawn doesn't lose me the knight because like I just said, I've broken the pin with the bishop on e2. Should my opponent take on e4, I can even get a queen trade in first and then play knight to d4 because the knight actually retroactively defends the bishop on e2, right? So that would just be 2 more trades on the board. On the other hand, if my opponent takes with the rook, right? If my opponent takes with the rook, there's a backwards pawn on d4, right? It has no way to push forward because I have this pawn chain staring at d4. So that's kind of a weakness now. We get knight to rook takes e4. I'll play knight to d2. I'm attacking the rook and attacking the bishop, although my opponent can always just trade the bishops. Cool. We'll trade, and I'm still up that extra piece. We're hitting the rook now on e4. Rook moves back. Cool. And I'll move my knight right back to f3. I know it seems a little bit redundant, but now we're controlling this d4 square, and we've opened up the floodgates for the rooks to come in. So we'll play rook to d1. We're now hitting this backwards pawn, and we can even put our own piece on d4, right? It's an outpost. There's no pawns that can kick out any piece that sits there. So I'll go ahead and double my rook, starting with rook to d4. It's kind of funny because on my screen, this looks like a pawn structure, even though I know it's a rook on d4. We get rook to e6. I'll go ahead and double my rooks. Now we're threatening to win the pawn on d5. Queen to g6. It looks like it's almost setting up a sort of attack, but I'm going to go ahead and just take on d5. I don't think there's any follow through to that attack, right? It's just one queen. She's not going to checkmate me by herself. So we'll take on d5, not to mention my opponent hasn't created any escape squares. So when this rook disappears, this back rank will be extremely weak, and we might even be able to get a back rank mate. Okay, rook takes, we'll go ahead and just recapture. There's even ideas here of queen takes c4 after my opponent defends the back rank, right? So I'm threatening mate. My opponent plays f6. Now there's an escape square for the king, but you'll notice that on this diagonal, right, there's only a rook there. So I'll go ahead and take on c4 with my queen. Now there's ideas of check, and I'm actually putting pressure on the rook because it's pinned to the king. Okay, we get h6, which I think misses that idea. So we'll go ahead and play check with the rook. King has to come to f7 or else he hangs the rook, right? King comes up to f7, and now we play rook to d7 check. And there's nowhere this king can go that will hold on to this rook on e6. No matter what my opponent plays, I'm taking that rook on the next turn. Oh my god, my arrows are... I don't know what's up with me recently in my videos. My arrows have just been horrendous. Like, I draw an arrow, and it goes anywhere but the square I was trying for it to land on. Anyways, king to h7. Our own back rank is kind of weak, but we should be totally fine. After anything like check, king to h2, there's actually no follow-up to that. So we'll keep hunting trades. Let's play knight to h4, hitting the queen with the idea of queen to f5, which would force a trade of the queen off the board, right? Queen to g5, we go ahead and give that check. Now our opponent has to take the queen. Well, actually, our opponent could move the king, but our opponent does in fact take the queen. It's just the more natural move. We'll take with the knight. There's now a weakness on g7. You know, rooks are happiest on the 7th rank, so we'll go ahead and take. And I am running a little bit low on time, just so you guys know. And I know some of you guys get nervous watching me go low on time, because that's usually where I get in trouble. In fact, that's usually where I start talking more than I need to as well. But in this game, we're actually playing 3-2, so I get 2 seconds back for every move I make. So c5, you can see it added 2 extra seconds. I believe the king is still here on g5. I've sort of lost track of him, but we're going in for promotion. This is not stalemate, so it's safe to play. And then queen to g4 check, moves the king back. With any luck, I can stay on brand and get a ladder's mate here. Let's play check with the rook, push the king back some more. King to e5, okay. So we don't get ladder's mate, but we will play queen to e6, finishing off the game. Nice, that was pretty good. Okay, let me do this without closing all of my tabs. Shift Alt C. Aha, right, so this is exactly what I thought the position looked like. Honestly, pretty straightforward game, just based off of those patterns that we were looking at. Let's go ahead and move on to game number 3. Sweet, nice, we get the white pieces again. That's not fair at all, but that's awesome. We get the white pieces again. Oh, my opponent says, I love your vids. Please give me a shout out, please. Yeah, obviously, if you guys play with me in a video, I'm more than happy to, put up your name in the chat. So if you guys just say hi, I'll throw you up on screen. Hello, and good luck, my friend. Let's go ahead and play bishop to f4. We get another London system, so I'm very happy with this. Okay, we get, that's so funny, 3 games in a row. This is like, Gotham Chess posted a video on how d5 and knight c6 destroys the London or something. Hikaru recently played this, now everybody's playing it. Anyways, we'll play c3 again. Very, very interesting. It is a relatively common opening. I'm making it sound like it's some crazy rare variant. It is a relatively common opening, but I've never seen it 3 times in a row like that. I usually see at least, a King's Indian, maybe a Dutch. I see something else in there normally. Bishop to e6, a little bit suspicious. Hitting the pawn on d5, so this bishop kind of just becomes a pawn. We'll play e3. We're just focused on normal development because my opponent hasn't played any moves that would be particularly weak, right? Queen to b8, for example, is a little bit suspect, but it doesn't actually create any weaknesses in the position. So I just go ahead and keep developing. And once I'm fully developed, I'll start looking for play in the position. We'll play bishop d3. Okay, queen to d7. We'll play knight to d2. Oh, and long castles. Okay, I love that my opponent castled long because this position just got 3 times more dynamic. Okay, I could castle right now, And that's usually been a problem of mine, that I want to start my attack before I've castled, which is a bad thing, so don't copy what I'm about to do. But we'll go ahead and play b4, start pushing on the queen side rather, and I want to get this attack going as soon as possible. Oh, my opponent plays on the same side. That's another thing. Sometimes your opponent will bite, right? So what my opponent probably wanted to do in this position was actually leave this alone. You want to be as far back as possible. So it takes me a lot of moves to reach your actual position. But if my opponent had played like knight to f6, h5, looking for some kind of counterplay, it's very likely my opponent would have been able to weaken my position before I could do anything. But for now, we'll go ahead and take on a5. We'll open up this file, looking into the queen side. My opponent recaptures. I think it is now time for me to castle, and so I can focus on putting all of my force to the queen side without worrying about the fact that my king is actually still in the center. Okay, knight to f6. Again, back to the relationship between pieces. The knight on c6, its function was to defend e5. It now is sitting on a5. So I will occupy e5 with my own knight and hit the queen in the process. Not to mention we're kind of targeting f7, but lucky this bishop on e6 is actually defending both of those pawns. Ooh, rook to e8 definitely hangs the queen. We'll take the queen on d7, and this attack just got a little bit easier, right? a4 is no longer defended, so we'll go ahead and play queen to a4 check. Knight to c6 would actually defend both of those, but then the knight no longer defends b7, so the rook can come out to this file, start targeting, and basically we're just looking for weaknesses and hitting them kind of methodically. Okay, pawn to c6, drops the knight on a5. Dark squares are now weak, right? This bishop on f4, like I mentioned at the very, very, very beginning of this video, it's a staple in the London system position. I mean, it just does so great of a job lasering into the position. We'll go ahead and take this pawn on b6, and I believe now our threat is queen here is actually checkmate. So we'll see how our opponent resolves to defend that. Okay, c5 I believe just allows checkmate. Yeah, we'll go ahead and play queen to c7, and we do in fact get checkmate. Let me go ahead and respond to my opponent. Oh, you guys are so nice. Honestly, I have the best fan base. Anyways, if you guys did enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Let me know down below if you particularly enjoyed this variant or if there's any other variants that you'd like to see. And I will see you guys in the next one.